There are days when even breathing doesn't feel like enough. You wake up with a tight chest, your mind running ahead of you, replaying mistakes you haven't made yet, conversations that haven't happened, endings that haven't come. And before you even start the day, you're already exhausted. No one sees you trembling inside, but you are. You smile automatically, pretend to be in control, but inside everything shakes. That's the truth few people admit. Anxiety doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers quietly, and it destroys just the same. The cruelest thing about anxiety isn't the fear itself, but the illusion that you could avoid it if you just thought a little more. You believe that worrying protects you, that anticipating what could go wrong gives you control. But in truth, you're burning yourself in the fire you lit. The anxious mind is a survival machine that's forgotten there's no danger anymore. And while it tries to predict every possible threat, it becomes its own enemy. To live anxiously is to live imprisoned by a future that doesn't yet exist. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." If your thoughts are alarm, urgency, comparison, and guilt, your soul will live in conflict. But if you can stop that chain for even a moment, a single second, something shifts. That second is the beginning of freedom. Anxiety isn't destroyed, it's understood. It isn't defeated by force, but through practice. Anyone who's ever felt anxiety knows what it's like to search for air where there is none, to seek certainty in uncertainty, to crave control where it doesn't exist. But Stoicism doesn't offer you control, it offers you direction. It doesn't promise to eliminate fear, but to teach you how to move with it. The Stoics knew that mental pain is inevitable, but they also knew it can become a teacher. Anxiety, through their eyes, isn't a sentence. It's a training ground for attention, temperance, and serenity. Seneca said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And that's exactly what anxiety is. Imagination out of control, yet no one teaches you to think differently. You grow up believing that worrying is being responsible, that surrendering is weakness, that stopping means failure. And so, your mind becomes a besieged city, a place where everything is measured in threats. But if you observe calmly, you'll see that you're not at war with the world, but with yourself. The body speaks before reason does. Breathing shortens, muscles tighten, the heart races. The mind believes danger is outside, but the body only reacts to the echo of thought. You can't command anxiety to stop, but you can learn not to fuel it. Every thought is a spark, some illuminate, others ignite, and you can choose which ones to keep. Anxiety wears many masks: excessive control, hyperactivity, the need for approval, the fear of failure. But they all share one root: the lack of trust that you'll know how to respond when something happens. That's the central wound of the anxious soul. It doesn't trust itself. So the path isn't to control more, but to trust more, not to accumulate techniques, but to release the fear of disorder. Stoicism isn't a cold doctrine, it's an art of living. Epictetus taught that it is not things themselves that disturb us, but the opinions we have about them. Anxiety isn't the unanswered email, the uncertain future, or someone's look. It's what you think all those things mean about you. That's why calming anxiety doesn't start outside, it starts within. The 10 tools you're about to hear aren't magic formulas, they're reminders, exercises the sages practiced every day to tame their minds while the world burned. They're small, consistent steps toward serenity. Because you don't need a miracle, you need a method. And that method is philosophy applied to the soul, not just the intellect. Regaining your peace isn't about eliminating thoughts. It's about learning not to believe them all. It's not about suppressing emotion. It's about guiding it. It's not about pretending calm. It's about building it. Sometimes that's done through breathing, other times through writing, and sometimes simply by observing without intervening. In that gesture, as simple as it is profound, your Stoic training begins. So before continuing, stop for a second, breathe. Notice the air entering and leaving. Feel how for a moment nothing else matters. That pause you just made is the beginning of your mastery. It's not the end of anxiety. It's the start of your freedom. Because when you learn to pause before the thought, before the impulse, you recover the control that was always within you. Here, we're not going to talk about impossible theories or empty phrases. We're going to talk about real, practical, breathable tools. 10 resources born from Stoicism, but alive in your daily life. In your rushed mornings, sleepless nights, and conversations where you pretend to be fine. This is your space to return to your center, to release the noise, to remember that calm isn't something you chase, it's something you practice. Because peace doesn't arrive all at once, it comes in the form of habit. And that habit begins with one simple act, choosing yourself over your fear. Before we begin, I want you to declare your commitment by writing in the comments, "From today, I choose calm over control." That phrase will be your reminder that not everything has to be in your hands to be okay. That serenity isn't achieved by mastering every detail, but by learning to release what doesn't depend on you. You're not here to control more, but to free yourself from the weight that this need has placed on your mind and body. This is the moment to start trusting life, to accept that you can't change the current, but you can learn to navigate it. What once made you anxious can now become your greatest training, learning to let go without feeling defeated, to trust without losing yourself, to breathe amidst uncertainty. Because control is the illusion of fear, and letting go is the bravest act of reason. Without further preamble, we begin. First Stoic tool, suspend immediate judgment. Anxiety doesn't arise from events themselves, but from the story you tell yourself about them. It's not the unanswered message, the change of plans, or someone's silence that hurts you. It's what you interpret behind it. It's the "I don't matter anymore," the "everything is going to go wrong," the "I must have done something wrong." What hurts isn't what happens, but the meaning you attach to it. And that's the hidden root of almost all anxiety. Epictetus summed it up in a sentence that should be engraved on every mirror. It's not things that disturb us, but our opinions about them. Yet the human mind, fast and impatient, rarely pauses to notice that difference. Before you breathe, you've already concluded. Before you understand, you've already feared. Before you see, you've already imagined the worst. And so, the mind becomes both the executioner and the victim. Suspending judgment isn't indifference. It's giving yourself permission not to decide yet. It's realizing you can look without interpreting, feel without exaggerating, think without inventing monsters. The pause between the event and the reaction is precisely where serenity is born. If you can place your awareness there, fear loses oxygen. Because that's what anxiety is, fear misinterpreted, a reflection of a hasty judgment that hasn't yet passed through the filter of reason. Imagine the moment you receive a message that doesn't say what you expected. Your mind, like an animal trained in urgency, rushes to fill the void. But that void is sacred. That's where you should stop. Breathe. Don't assume. Don't respond. Just observe the bare fact. A message arrived. Nothing more. What comes after is interpretation, not truth, and you decide whether that interpretation becomes poison or balm. To suspend judgment is to extinguish the fire before it begins. It's seeing yourself just before you strike the spark. It's asking, what I'm thinking, is it a fact or a story? And if it's a story, who wrote it? Sometimes it was fear, sometimes habit, sometimes an old wound still open. But once you recognize it, it no longer rules. It no longer dictates your pulse. Practice this exercise in everyday life. When something stirs you, say to yourself, stop. Take 3 breaths. Observe what really happened, not what you imagined, not what you fear, not what you anticipate. Just the fact. And you'll see that most of your storms aren't from the world, they're from thought. That's the Stoic teaching. Whoever masters their judgment masters their calm. because where there is no interpretation, there is no anxiety. The mind that learns to wait before deciding ceases to be a hostage of impulse. And that's the first step toward inner freedom. Not believing everything you think, not reacting to everything you feel, and not fearing everything you imagine. Suspending immediate judgment doesn't make you cold, it makes you wise. It doesn't distance you from life. It returns you to it with clearer eyes. Because only when you stop running after every thought does the mind find solid ground on which it can rest. When you begin to practice this pause, you'll notice something surprising. The body continues teaching what the mind hasn't yet learned. You realize that judgment isn't only in thoughts, but also in tense shoulders, in a clenched stomach, in short breaths. Anxiety is the physical form of believing too much in your ideas. That's why suspending judgment also means releasing rigidity. Breathe slower, and you'll see how the mind stops shouting. The Stoics knew that the most dangerous emotion wasn't sadness or anger, but premature interpretation. The unobserving mind creates enemies where there are circumstances, tragedies where there are changes, threats where there are simple turns of fate. Epictetus called this confusion the error of impression, seeing a shadow and believing it's a thief. How many times have you done that? How many nights has something stolen your sleep only to resolve itself by morning? Suspending judgment is an act of humility. It's admitting you don't know everything, that the future isn't in your hands, that your assumptions are only sketches, not truths. It's telling yourself, I don't know yet. And it's okay not to know. That phrase, so simple and so feared, is a doorway to peace. Because when you give up the need to be right immediately, you also give up suffering without cause. Every time your mind begins to burn with what if, imagine a flickering lamp. That's your signal. Stop. Don't feed the flame. Look at the scene from outside. What's really happening? What's under your control? What depends on the world, on others, on chance? When you take that inventory, the fire shrinks to the size of a candle, and a candle you can blow out. Think of Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, awake in his campaign tent while the entire empire burned with wars and plagues. He wrote, "If it's beyond your control, why be disturbed? If it's within it, why not act already?" The most powerful man in the world practiced the art of not interpreting more than necessary, because he understood that chaos isn't overcome with noise, but with clarity. Make that clarity your daily training. You don't need temples or mantras, just presence. When worry comes, observe it as if it belonged to someone else. Say, there's the thought. That's not me. I'm not that, and breathe again. At first it will feel useless. The mind will want to run again. It will whisper, do something, think something, react now. But that voice is fear's echo. Each time you don't obey it, it weakens. Each time you watch it without following, you grow. That's how anxiety is tamed, with silence and with patience. It's not about becoming stone, but rock with roots. Stone resists, rock sustains. Learning to suspend judgment turns you into that rock, steady, yet alive. Your serenity won't be a cold mask, but a tempered strength. Because behind every true calm, there's a mind that learned not to believe its first thought. And there lies the essential teaching. Don't trust the first voice that speaks inside you. It's the loudest, but almost always the least wise. Beneath fear, there's a quiet reason waiting to be heard. Beneath anxiety, there's a space that only opens when you choose not to rush. That space is your freedom. Every time you suspend judgment, you remind the world that your mind belongs to you, that not just anything can enter it, that not every event can steal your peace. That's the essence of Stoic mastery, not controlling the universe, but preventing your interpretations from destroying you. Next time something unsettles you, remember, you don't know if it's good or bad, loss or protection. Let time reveal what anxiety tries to decide for you. And in the meantime, stay, observe, breathe, return to yourself. Right there, in that pause that seems like nothing, begins the calm you've been searching for. Second Stoic tool, breathe consciously. Anxiety doesn't begin in the mind, it begins in the air, in that shallow breath that barely reaches the bottom of your lungs, in that feeling of being inside a body that doesn't fill, that feels tight from within. That's where anguish settles, not in your thoughts, but in the rhythm that sustains them. When you breathe poorly, you think poorly. When you think poorly, it feels like the world is collapsing. The soul, Marcus Aurelius said, takes on the color of your thoughts, but your thoughts take on the rhythm of your breath. If you breathe fast, the soul rushes. If you breathe slowly, the soul pauses. That's why the Stoics, long before any modern school of meditation, understood that to master your breath is to master your mind. Epictetus knew it without needing to say it. All it takes is a single moment of air to regain control. Imagine that moment when you're on the verge of collapse. Your heart races, your chest tightens, your thoughts pile on top of each other, and the first thing you do, without realizing it, is hold your breath. That's where the mistake begins. You think you're pausing to calm down, but in truth, you're suffocating yourself more. Anxiety feeds on that tense pause, on that air you refuse to release. Breathing consciously isn't about filling your body with oxygen, it's about emptying it of urgency. It's giving your soul back its natural rhythm. 3 slow breaths. Inhale through the nose. Hold. Exhale through the mouth. Repeating that gesture without expecting anything is how you return to the ground. There's no magic, but there is a miracle. The mind begins to obey the body instead of fear. The volume of thought lowers. What felt unbearable a minute ago becomes manageable. The Stoics saw breathing as a bridge between body and soul. Seneca called it the rhythm of nature within us. And he was right. When your breath becomes disordered, the soul scatters. When you bring it back into order, everything else begins to align. Breathing consciously is remembering that serenity isn't found outside. It's built within, to the rhythm of every exhalation. The anxious mind moves faster than the air that sustains it. That's why the practice isn't to think better, but to breathe slower. A mind that runs grows weary, but a mind that breathes can wait. And waiting without overflowing is an art. In that slowness, temperance appears. In that quiet rhythm, reason regains its voice. Do it now. No theory needed. Inhale calmly. Feel the air enter as if washing something inside you. Hold it for a second. Exhale and release the weight you didn't know you were carrying. Do it 3 times. It's not about controlling your breath, but about observing it, like a guardian watching the fire so it doesn't go out. Each time anxiety appears, remember this. The breath is the only refuge you always carry with you. No wall, no distance, no noise can take it from you. Your body is your temple, your breath, the key, and every time you choose to use it consciously, you are coming home. Thus, with air as your ally, the soul stops drowning, and where once there was a whirlwind of thoughts, there is now a steady pulse that says, I am here, I am alive, and nothing forces me to rush. When the breath quickens, the soul gets lost. In that instant, when the air cuts short and the body forgets its rhythm, the mind fills with noise. Anxiety doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just tightens your chest, steals your air, and convinces you that something's wrong, even if you don't know what. But the body doesn't lie. It tells you that you've been living outward, that you've forgotten to return to yourself. The Stoics knew there can be no wise thought in an agitated body. That's why they taught that every exercise of reason should begin with a simple act. To breathe, inhale with presence, exhale with intention. It's not a spiritual trick, it's physiology with a soul. The air organizes what the mind scatters. Every inhalation creates space, every exhalation clears away excess noise. In that dance of seconds, something greater than calm is restored, inner governance. Seneca wrote, "He who masters his breathing governs his mood." And he wasn't referring to complex techniques, but to the power of pausing when everything seems to demand reaction. 3 conscious breaths before replying. 3 breaths before assuming the worst. 3 breaths before giving up. That small ritual can save you hours of anguish or words you might later regret. Conscious breathing is the oldest antidote to emotional haste. When fear or anger arrives, the body wants to run, attack, or flee. But if you stay still and breathe deeply, you're telling your brain, there is no danger. The heart listens, the mind obeys, and little by little the soul stops trembling. Air has memory. It holds traces of every tense day you've lived and every worried night you've endured, but it also knows how to forgive. Every slow breath is a chance to rewrite your physical history of fear. If you do it each morning before looking at your phone, you'll notice how the day stops feeling like a threat. The world doesn't change, you do. Remember this, the air that enters asks no permission, and the air that leaves owes no debt. It's the fairest cycle of existence, and when you respect it, when you neither rush nor force it, you discover that calm isn't the absence of noise, but the presence of rhythm. Anxiety doesn't vanish completely, but it ceases to rule your steps. So the next time your mind starts to race, don't fight it. Breathe. Let every inhalation remind you that you are alive, and every exhalation teach you that you can let go without losing anything. The air you hold doesn't belong to you, but it can save you. And in that moment when your body finds its rhythm again, reason awakens, the soul quiets, and you remember what Epictetus meant. It's not things that disturb you, but how you breathe in front of them. That is the first victory of the day, to conquer the air before fear does it for you. Third Stoic tool, distinguish what can be controlled. Anxiety begins where your power ends. Every thought that tries to govern what doesn't depend on you is an invisible rope tying you to suffering. You wake up checking messages that haven't arrived, replaying conversations you can't change, imagining outcomes that don't exist, and without realizing it, you turn your mind into a battlefield where you fight against ghosts. Epictetus warned with a clarity that still cuts through time. There are things that depend on us and things that do not. That phrase, so simple, could save you years of anguish if you truly understood it, because the anxious mind cannot tolerate limits. It wants to control the weather, the reactions, the judgments, the silences. But the more it tries to grasp, the smaller it becomes. The uncontrollable cannot be mastered, it must be accepted. Try this Stoic exercise. Stop for a moment and observe what worries you today. Is it within your control? Does it depend directly on your actions or your will? If the answer is no, then the only thing you can do is release it with dignity, not out of resignation, but out of wisdom. Because letting go isn't surrender, it's saving your strength for what you can truly transform. Seneca wrote, "Nothing is more miserable than the man who is always worried about what may happen. That worry doesn't change the future, it only destroys the present. And the present, that brief, sacred space, is the only thing you truly possess. It's not about indifference, it's about direction. The wise choose where to invest their energy and never waste it on what lies beyond their power. Imagine the serenity of someone who stops fighting the sea and learns to sail. That's the difference between someone who lives from anxiety and someone who lives from logos. The first tries to stop the waves with their hands, the second adjusts the sail. You decide which one you'll be. Each time you feel control slipping away, repeat silently, "This does not belong to me." Those 4 words are an invisible armor. They remind you that you cannot control others' actions, but you can control how you respond. You cannot stop the passing of time, but you can decide what to do with the day you have. You cannot avoid pain, but you can refuse to suffer twice, once from the event and again from anticipation. The Stoic doesn't seek for everything to go well. They seek to be well no matter what happens. That is the difference between a slave mind and a free one. Anxiety feeds on the illusion of control. Freedom is born from conscious acceptance. So next time your mind tries to anticipate, dominate, or predict the unpredictable, pause, breathe, ask yourself, does this depend on me? If not, release it. If yes, act, and then release again. That is the cycle that breaks anxiety and trains serenity. Remember, freedom isn't conquered in the external world, but in the invisible frontier between what you can and cannot control. When you honor that line, the mind stops chasing chaos and begins walking alongside reason. That's where true calm begins. The hardest thing to accept isn't that we can't control everything, it's that we never could. From childhood, we were taught that effort changes everything, that if you do things right, if you try hard enough, things will turn out as expected. But life doesn't work that way. You can do everything correctly and still lose. You can love with all your soul and not be loved back. You can take care of your body and still fall ill. Total control is an illusion the mind creates to feel safe. But the Stoic knows safety isn't in control, it's in acceptance. And that acceptance isn't surrender, it's maturity. Imagine your life as a ship in the middle of the sea. There are winds, currents, and storms, and you only have the helm. You can't decide when the wind will blow or how strong it will be, but you can adjust the sails, keep the course, and choose not to sink into despair. Control, in its wisest form, isn't mastering the sea, it's steering the helm with serenity. That's what Epictetus meant when he said, "Don't seek for events to happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do, and your life will flow serenely." The anxious soul fights everything it doesn't understand. It resists, it tightens, it exhausts itself. The wise soul, instead, cooperates with reality. It doesn't surrender to it, it aligns with it. And that alignment isn't conformity, it's real power. Because whoever accepts the limits of their dominion focuses their energy on what they can transform, their judgment, their action, their response. That is the sacred frontier of control. When you learn to distinguish between what's controllable and what's not, your mind becomes a sanctuary. You start to notice that 90% of what steals your peace are things you could never change. Other people's opinions, their decisions, the weather, the past, the future. All of that belongs to the realm of chance, not yours. But within you lies an inviolable territory, your will. In that space, you are sovereign. You can choose to be just, to be patient, to be balanced, even when the whole world collapses around you. The Stoic doesn't seek control to feel powerful. They seek it to feel free. And the purest freedom is to depend on nothing that doesn't depend on you. Every time you release something you can't change, you reclaim a piece of your life. Every time you stop trying to manipulate what lies beyond your reach, you grow stronger. Control isn't measured by how many things you dominate, but by the serenity with which you accept the ones you cannot. So stop for a moment and ask yourself, what are you trying to control today that doesn't really depend on you? Maybe it's a person, an outcome, an emotion. Maybe it's your reputation, the pace of time, or someone's affection. Observe it, breathe, acknowledge it, and then let it go with dignity, because as long as you try to rule the uncontrollable, you'll be its slave. But when you accept it, you reclaim your inner throne. Fourth Stoic tool, use negative visualization. Fear is the mother of all anxiety, and its most constant fuel is surprise. What arrives unanticipated, what you haven't mentally rehearsed, strikes without warning and destroys you from within. The Stoic does not fear the unexpected because they train to live with it. They practice what the ancients called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of misfortunes, not as obsession or pessimism, but as preparation for what might come, so that neither loss nor pain nor failure finds them without soul or defense. Close your eyes and think of what you fear losing most. A person, your health, your work, your stability. Imagine for a moment that it disappears. Feel the emptiness, the disorientation, the tremor in your chest. Now observe what happens inside you. Do you collapse or remain standing? Do you cling or let go? What this exercise reveals isn't the horror of the future, but the fragility of present attachment. It shows you which part of you still depends too much on the world, and in that mirror lies an uncomfortable truth. We don't suffer so much from what we lose, but from having lived, believing we'd never lose it. Seneca said that nothing truly belongs to us. Everything is merely lent. Everything you have, your body, your loved ones, your position, your fortune, has been given by life for you to care for, not to claim as eternal property. Visualizing its loss isn't an act of tragedy, but of lucid gratitude. It teaches you to value what you have today without turning it into an idol. Anxiety blooms when the soul clings to what it cannot keep. Serenity appears when you accept that nothing is yours and still choose to love. The Stoic doesn't aim to live in paranoia about future evils, but in the strength of one who has already faced them before they arrive. Thus, when the blow comes, it doesn't destroy. They meet it prepared. Each day, briefly imagine what could go wrong: a disagreement, a mistake, a loss. Not to attract it, but to reduce its power. Because what is feared and not faced grows in the shadows. What is faced directly shrinks and becomes manageable. The ancients said that a trained soldier does not fear battle. He fears being unprepared for it. Likewise, a trained mind doesn't fear chaos. It fears surprise. Practicing negative visualization arms the spirit with foresight. You cannot avoid storms, but you can learn to open the umbrella before it rains. You cannot stop the night from coming, but you can light a lamp within yourself. Through this practice, you discover a transformative truth. Everything you lose ceases to be a tragedy and becomes part of the natural order. Nothing dies before its time. Nothing arrives without reason. What happens was meant to happen, and though it may hurt, pain becomes more bearable when it no longer seems unjust. Think of how most people react to setbacks. First they deny, then they lament, then they seek someone to blame. The Stoic does the opposite: accepts, understands, adapts. The premeditatio malorum doesn't seek to harden your heart into stone. It tempers it, like steel forged in fire that endures without breaking. Seneca explained it simply. Those who always expect calm despair at the first wind. Those who know that wind will eventually blow do not curse when the storm arrives. The goal of this exercise isn't to live anticipating disasters, but to free yourself from the fear that potential disasters provoke. If you can visualize loss with serenity, you will no longer freeze before its shadow. You begin to see life with loving detachment, to enjoy without possessing, to be grateful without demanding, to embrace without fearing, to let go. It's a form of freedom that unsettles those who confuse love with control. But the Stoics understood, only those who accept death can live fully. Only those who accept loss can love without anxiety. Each time you practice this tool, do it not as a gloomy ritual, but as training to strengthen your soul. Imagine an ordinary day where everything goes wrong. Watch your thoughts. Notice what judgments arise, what phrases echo in your mind. Perhaps you'll hear, "I can't stand this. This shouldn't have happened. Why me?" Those phrases are the chains binding you to suffering. Change a single word and you change your destiny. Instead of, "I can't stand this," say, "I will withstand this too." Instead of, "This shouldn't have happened," say, "This had to happen so I could learn to respond with calm." The language of the soul is rewritten when you choose acceptance. In his letters to Lucilius, Seneca wrote, "He who fears the future torments himself unnecessarily. There is no punishment crueler than suffering twice, once for what you fear and again for what happens." Negative visualization breaks that double torment. It teaches you to die a little every day in your attachments, your expectations, your certainties, so that when life takes something from you, it doesn't take your peace as well. This is the art of foreseeing without anguish, of accepting without surrender, of keeping the heart open even in the midst of loss. Start with small things. Imagine a cherished object breaking, someone arriving late, a plan being cancelled. Watch how your body reacts, how your mind rebels. Then breathe and remember, nothing external has power over my peace. If you can stay calm in small matters, you'll be ready for the great ones. The Stoics weren't born unshakable. They trained in every daily setback until calm became habit. And there's something deeper still. Visualizing loss not only reduces anxiety, it amplifies gratitude. Because every time you imagine something could be gone, you learn to appreciate that it's still here. You look at the people you love with new eyes, knowing their presence is a daily miracle. You savor a sunrise with the awareness that it could be your last. You cherish a simple moment because you know there's no guarantee it will return. This serene gratitude is the true antidote to anxiety, not naive optimism, but lucid awareness of impermanence. Suddenly, fear transforms into a form of wisdom. You no longer dread what may come because you understand that every potential loss reveals something about yourself. You discover that calm isn't built when nothing changes, but when nothing overwhelms you, even when everything changes. Thus, each negative visualization ceases to be a philosophical exercise and becomes an act of liberation. Each time you do it, you dismantle a little more of the illusion of control that feeds your anxiety. Remember, you cannot prevent life from taking things from you, but you can prevent it from taking your serenity. Imagine, accept, give thanks. That is the triad that turns fear into wisdom. And when you finish your practice, return to the present with a simple phrase, one you can repeat silently whenever anxiety approaches. I am prepared to lose everything and still remain at peace. There is no amulet more powerful than that acceptance. For the one who is ready to let go of everything no longer has anything to fear. Fifth Stoic tool, repeat short maxims. There are moments when the mind feels like a dark room full of echoes. You tell yourself everything will be fine, but you don't believe it. You try to distract yourself, but you return to the same place. Anxiety doesn't scream. It whispers on a loop until its voice blends with yours. In those moments, you don't need a speech. You need a phrase to anchor you, a line that becomes a rope when you feel like you're sinking. The Stoics knew this. They didn't speak of mantras as in other philosophies, but they understood the power of repeated words. Epictetus taught that the soul is trained just like the body through repetition. Just as the arm strengthens by lifting the same weight again and again, the spirit steadies itself by repeating ideas that bring order to chaos. They called them maxims, small truths that fit in a single breath, but hold the strength of an entire life. In the midst of fear, when your heart races and your mind fabricates catastrophic scenarios, a maxim works like an inner command that restores calm. It doesn't argue with anxiety or try to convince it. It pierces through it. I only control my reaction. This too shall pass. No evil lasts forever. Each one is a seed that, when repeated with intention, becomes a root. It's not superstition, it's thought training. Imagine your mind as a theater with only one light and one voice. If you don't choose what to say, fear improvises the script. That's why the Stoics insisted, direct your words and you will direct your soul. When you repeat a maxim, you're not denying reality. You're choosing how to interpret it. You're arranging your mind before it turns against you. Seneca explained it with precision. Words are medicine for the sick soul, but not just any words. Only those grounded in truth heal, the rest merely numb. That's why maxims must be brief, direct and rational. They aren't meant to inspire, they're meant to remind you of the essential. They're not pretty phrases for decoration, but tools to hold on to when everything collapses. Think of a moment of anxiety, that feeling that something will go wrong, that you won't be able to handle what's coming. Now repeat calmly, this too shall pass. Don't say it with hope, say it with certainty. Everything passes. The fear, the trembling, the sleeplessness, the thought that feels eternal, all of it. You repeat it not to deceive yourself, but to remind yourself that life is movement and that no mental state is permanent. When Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations, he wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wrote for himself, to repeat in words the discipline his mind needed to remember. Every phrase was a battle against his own mind. Do not let emotion overpower reason. Do what must be done and endure what follows. Life is what you make of your thoughts. Those were his shields. His phrases were his anchors. Do the same. Find your own maxims. They don't have to come from ancient books. They must be the ones that ignite your clarity when fear clouds it. Phrases like, "I can endure this," "Nothing external rules me," or "Calm is my choice," can become your daily beacons. Write them down, carry them with you. Repeat each one in the smallest moments, not only when panic strikes. That's how they become part of you. Repetition creates presence. The anxious mind lives in the future. Maxims bring it back. Every word repeated consciously is a hammer strike on the anvil of serenity. Repetition is not weakness, it's consistency. It's reminding yourself again and again that you can choose your reaction, because when chaos comes, and it always does, you won't have time to philosophize. You'll only have time to act, and the phrases you've planted will become your automatic response. You don't need many. 3 are enough. The Stoic doesn't collect ideas, they embody them. Try this. Choose one maxim and repeat it when you wake, before bed, and every time your mind trembles. You don't need to believe it at first. Repeat it until you do. Words gain power when they become habit, and habit shapes character. That's how anxiety is overcome, not with force but with constancy, not with shouts but with the quiet repetition of inner truth. Each maxim is an invisible rope that brings you back to the ground, but it's not enough to repeat. You must embody it. A maxim has no power through sound alone, but through the truth it awakens in you. If you say, "I only control my reaction," yet still try to control others, it's not a maxim, it's self-deception. Words heal only when they're lived, when they stop being comfort and become direction. The ancients knew the mind could be disciplined through verbal practice. It's no coincidence the Stoics used daily writing as ritual. They didn't write to remember, they wrote to reprogram. Every line was a seed thrown into the soul. Seneca described it simply: we tell ourselves the same things each day because each day we forget. And that is the root of anxiety, forgetting what we already know. Forgetting that fear doesn't rule us, that pain passes, that the present is enough. Repeating maxims doesn't make you fanatical, it makes you aware. We live in a world where repetition means noise, news, notifications, distractions, but the Stoic uses it as an instrument of order. If you don't repeat what matters, you'll end up repeating what doesn't. Every anxious thought that returns again and again is simply repetition misdirected. The anxious mind already repeats. You must choose what it repeats. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul takes the color of its thoughts." If your thoughts say something will go wrong, your soul is dyed with fear. If you repeat that you can endure, it's dyed with strength. There is no neutrality in the mind. You either choose the color or someone else chooses it for you. Stoic maxims are brushes of clarity, and each repetition paints your calm anew. Here's something few notice. The Stoics didn't use their maxims only in suffering, but also in peace. They knew calm isn't trained in the fire, but before it begins. If you repeat, "This too shall pass," when you're calm, your mind will remember that steadiness when the storm arrives. Don't wait for chaos to practice serenity. Create a small ritual. Upon waking, say 3 phrases: 1 for the body, 1 for the mind, 1 for the soul. For the body, "I am here and that is enough." For the mind, "I only control my reaction." For the soul, "Nothing is missing now." They're simple but powerful, not prayers, reminders, and every reminder is an affirmation of freedom. At first, it may feel mechanical, empty, like an echo without meaning. But little by little, the voice changes. The phrase becomes part of your breathing. You no longer say it, it begins to say you. That's the moment when it ceases to be words and becomes inner structure. At that point, anxiety loses its command because the mind has learned to speak its own language of calm. Maxims don't eliminate problems, but they return control of the only space that truly belongs to you, your inner world. Everything external can change: work, relationships, health, fortune, but your inner voice is the final stronghold. The Stoics called it the hegemonikon, the rational center that stands firm when everything else falls. Each maxim is a guard posted at that gate, and if you ever doubt their power, remember this: everything you believe today was born from a repeated idea. Advertising, religion, fear, hope, all shape the mind through repetition. So it's not that repetition doesn't work, it's that most people use it to enslave themselves. You use it to set yourself free, because anxiety isn't defeated with force, but with direction. Not with grand speeches, but with small phrases said many times with full awareness. Not with shouts, but with serenity that insists, "This too shall pass. Nothing external can harm me. I only control my reaction." Say them with your soul again and again, and you'll see how the noise fades. Calm doesn't arrive all at once. It's built word by word, and when you think you've lost it, when fear returns disguised as thought, repeat your maxim. It doesn't matter if your voice trembles, repeat it anyway. Because sometimes the only way not to fall is to quietly remind yourself that you still know how to rise. Sixth Stoic tool: simplify your choices. We live exhausted, not from a lack of time, but from an excess of options. Every day we choose without rest what to watch, what to eat, what to reply, what to show, what to hide. And without realizing it, the soul tires more from deciding than from living. The anxious mind never rests, because everything becomes a choice, and every choice becomes an invisible battle. Marcus Aurelius warned that it's not events that disturb us, but our interpretations of them. And in the modern age, we interpret everything: every silence, every gesture, every word, every look that takes too long to arrive. The modern human isn't oppressed by a lack of freedom, but by too much of it. You can choose between thousands of paths, and that abundance, instead of bringing peace, traps you. Each decision opens a door, and behind it, 1,000 new doubts. Anxiety is nothing more than the echo of so many open doors. The irony is that the more you choose, the less free you feel. The wise person, on the other hand, chooses little, but does so with full awareness. Seneca said, "It's not that we have little time, but that we waste much." And one of the most common ways we waste it is through endless decision-making. You wake up and choose clothes, choose what to check first, who to reply to, what news to read, what video to watch, what emotion to display. In a single day, you make hundreds of micro-decisions that drain the soul. It's no wonder you reach nightfall empty of energy, but with nothing nourishing done. Simplifying is an art. It doesn't mean giving up or losing possibilities. It means freeing space for what's essential. The mind needs order as much as the body needs rest. And if you fill your day with trivial decisions, your thought scatters, your energy dissolves, and your serenity vanishes. Anxiety doesn't come from the world. It comes from your inability to structure it. Start small. Decide once what you usually decide 100 times. Choose a routine and make it yours. Set a time to check your phone. Create a space for work, a daily moment for silence. Don't let everything be up for debate. Every time you remove an unnecessary decision, you gain presence. Every "I don't need to think about this" is a small conquest of peace. The modern world celebrates multitasking, but the soul wasn't born to be divided. Every purposeless choice fragments you. Every postponed task steals your energy. The Stoics understood this. Wisdom isn't in doing more, but in doing with intention. When you simplify your choices, you give shape to your life. You no longer let the current decide for you. You take the helm and choose only what brings you closer to your purpose. Serenity isn't in controlling everything, it's in not being dragged by everything. And here lies the Stoic principle that changes everything. Do not be disturbed by what you cannot control, nor by what you do not need to decide. That phrase holds a freedom few practice. Because there are decisions that aren't yours, battles you don't need to fight, paths you don't have to take. Learning to say, "This isn't mine," is also a decision. In a world that pushes you to choose quickly, the Stoic chooses calmly. They know that rushing is the first way to lose control. So every morning before diving into the noise, ask yourself a simple question. What truly depends on me today? Everything else, let it go. Anxiety is born from trying to decide over what isn't ours, from wanting to define the outcome before we've acted. But wisdom lies in deciding only over what's essential: your actions, your attention, your response. The real problem isn't how many decisions you make, but how much emotional energy you invest in each one. The anxious mind turns small things into mountains, a message unanswered into abandonment, a distracted look into rejection, a change of plans into tragedy. That's how we end up exhausted before the day even begins. The wise don't drown in that sea because they know how to distinguish between what deserves reflection and what only requires acceptance. Not everything must be analyzed. Not everything must be answered. Not everything must be decided. Every unnecessary choice is a thread that binds you. It seems light, but over time you realize you can no longer move. So many doubts over small things end up blocking your greater movements. You freeze, doubting even what you already knew. That's why the Stoics practiced voluntary reduction, dressing the same, eating simply, owning few things, speaking only with purpose. Not out of poverty, but for freedom. Whoever needs less, fears less. Whoever chooses less, lives better. There's a deep tranquility that comes when your life has structure, not a rigid one, but a chosen one. Anxiety grows where everything is open. Peace lives where there are clear limits. If you let your mind wonder all day what to do, it will drown in its own options. But if you give it a frame, a direction, a purpose, your energy stops scattering and becomes presence. Ask yourself, do I really need to decide this? Does it contribute to my purpose, or does it just feed my confusion? Each time you eliminate a useless question, you'll feel a physical relief. You might not notice it instantly, but in a few days your mind will feel lighter, and when anxiety returns, you'll know you don't need more control, just less noise. Epictetus taught it simply: do not seek for things to happen as you wish, but wish for things to happen as they do. In other words, stop resisting the flow of life. You don't need to redesign every second. You don't need to justify every step. Serenity arrives when you choose few things, but choose them fully. Modern life sells freedom in the form of overload. Every platform, every screen, every notification is an invitation to decide something, to reply, to comment, to look, to act. It's a constant noise that gives the illusion of control while stealing your stillness. And the worst part is, we accept it as normal. We believe calm will come when we solve everything, but in truth, it only appears when we stop trying to solve everything. The soul doesn't need more stimulation, it needs purpose. That's why Stoic simplification isn't minimalist aesthetics, it's a return to essence. It's not about living with fewer things, but with fewer contradictions, with less inner noise, fewer justifications, fewer forced explanations. When you decide from silence, your choices weigh more and cost less. Anxiety isn't healed with more decisions, but with fewer. It doesn't quiet down by adding options, but by choosing with intention. If everything feels urgent, nothing is. And if everything feels important, your mind has already lost its hierarchy. The Stoics knew a mind without hierarchy destroys itself. That's why they ordered their thoughts daily, from dawn to rest. Not to be perfect, but to be clear. Imagine your life as a table. Every decision is an object placed upon it. Some are useful, others are just clutter. If the table is full, you can't work, think, or rest. Simplifying your choices is clearing that table, leaving only what's essential. And when space appears, peace appears too. So next time you feel your mind racing and can't stop it, don't think about controlling it. Ask what you can remove. Not what you can do, but what you can stop doing. In that letting go lies your serenity. Because true strength isn't in adding, but in releasing. Remember this: every unnecessary choice is a crack in your tranquility. Every conscious decision is a stone in the foundation of your calm. If you learn to simplify, anxiety doesn't vanish magically, but it becomes manageable, human, comprehensible. And that's enough to regain control of your life without obsessing over controlling everything. That is how the Stoic walks, with few choices, but firm ones, with few commitments, but noble ones, with few desires, but deep ones. Calm isn't a distant reward. It's the direct result of having chosen well what deserves your attention and what does not. Seventh Stoic tool: find refuge in silence. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of yourself without distraction. Yet in a world where everything competes for your attention, being silent feels almost like an act of rebellion. Today, many fear silence more than solitude, because when the noise fades, what we've been avoiding appears: our thoughts, our wounds, our unresolved truths. And yet it's precisely there, in that space without stimulus, where the soul finally breathes again. Anxiety doesn't just come from what happens outside, but from the constant echo of what we can't quiet within. You check your phone so you don't have to think. You open another tab so you don't have to feel. You fill your schedule because you fear being alone with your questions. Noise has become a social anesthetic, a refined form of escape. But Seneca warned of this 2,000 years ago. In the midst of Rome's clamor, the wise must learn to live in silence. He wasn't speaking of fleeing to the desert, but of training the mind to remain at peace even when the world shouts. Stoic silence is not isolation, it is calibration. It is a laboratory where you observe without reacting, where emotions pass like clouds without turning into storms. Epictetus taught that we should not fear the thoughts that arrive, but the consent we give them. In silence you practice that, letting the mind speak without obeying it. Think of it this way: outer noise reflects inner noise. If your mind is restless, it will seek more stimulation. But when you cultivate calm within, even the sounds of the world lose their power over you. Silence, then, is not a reward after anxiety. It is the antidote that prevents it. Many believe stillness is unproductive, that doing nothing is a waste of time. But the Stoics knew that every action is born from thought, and clear thought requires silence. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that one should withdraw within oneself, like a soldier returning to camp to repair his weapons. That brief retreat was his way of remembering who was in command, himself, not chaos. And you, when was the last time you truly listened to yourself, not to judge or analyze, but simply to hear? If your soul could speak, it might tell you it's tired of being constantly lit up, of endless demands, endless screens, endless goals. It might just want for a moment to be, without fear of falling behind, because silence doesn't slow you down, it brings you back to the present. The anxious mind seeks noise the way a drowning man seeks air, but the more noise it consumes, the deeper it sinks. Silence, on the other hand, is the surface. It's where you float effortlessly, realizing you don't need to struggle so much to exist. And when you experience it, even for a few minutes, something shifts inside you. Your breathing slows, your body softens, your thoughts clear. You realize calm was never outside. It was waiting inside, beneath all the noise you mistook for life. It's not about escaping the world, but about entering it with a steadier rhythm. Silence prepares you for that. It gives you the clarity to speak only when your words add value, and to stay quiet when you would only echo the crowd. It teaches you to respond from awareness, not impulse, and that small difference is what separates reaction from wisdom. That's why the Stoics practiced what we might now call noise fasts, daily moments without conversation, without reading, without stimulus. Not as punishment, but as mental hygiene. The soul, too, becomes polluted if it's never cleansed, and its cleansing is called silence. When you learn to inhabit it, you discover silence isn't empty, it's full of answers. but they don't shout. They arrive quietly, serenely, when you finally make space for them. Sometimes all it takes is 10 minutes, 10 minutes of breathing, without judging, without interpreting, without seeking, just being. Those minutes are worth more than 100 pieces of advice. Silence, properly understood, is a form of dialogue, not with the world, but with yourself. It's the space where you can ask without fear, what am I really feeling? Why do I keep chasing what hurts me? What must I release to be at peace? Questions that don't fit in noise, questions only silence can answer. Silence is the soul's refuge when the world becomes unbearable. It's not escape, it's resistance. Within it, what seemed urgent reveals itself as trivial, and what seemed impossible finds proportion. Silence puts everything in its rightful place. That's why the ancients called it the inner temple, the place where the wise return to themselves to remember what matters, that nothing external can disturb them unless they allow it. Anxiety, on the other hand, fears that space. It prefers noise because noise keeps it alive. Every notification, every shallow conversation, every distraction feeds the illusion of control. But beneath the noise lies fear, the fear of being alone with what you truly feel. Silence gives you no escape. It confronts you. It shows you the pulse of your thoughts, the weight of your judgments, the true rhythm of your breathing. It's uncomfortable, but that's where change begins. Seneca knew this well when he wrote, "Nothing but the soul can give us rest." But the soul cannot rest until it learns to withdraw. For him, withdrawal was an act of wisdom. In a loud, violent empire, the philosopher didn't seek to flee Rome. He built Rome within his mind, an ordered, sober, steady place where nothing external could plunder his peace. That is the true Stoic practice of silence, not disconnecting from the world, but remaining in it without losing yourself. When you find your inner refuge, everything changes. You begin to see that many things need no response, that many conflicts dissolve on their own, that many battles are best won by not fighting them. You discover that silence has power, that not replying can be more decisive than any argument, that not reacting is also a form of action. Temperance isn't measured by how much you say, but by how much you can keep to yourself. There's a profound difference between forced silence and chosen silence. The first wounds, the second heals. The silence you choose consciously isn't emptiness, it's contained energy. It's the pause that separates reaction from discernment. It's the space where you can decide who you want to be before you speak, before you respond, before you act. It's the interval where reason prevails over impulse, where the soul clears and strengthens itself. Practice this tool simply. Each day, seek a few minutes without stimulus, not to do anything, but to be with yourself. Turn off your phone. Sit. Breathe. Don't try to meditate or concentrate. Just observe. Let thoughts come and go. At first, it will feel uncomfortable, almost unbearable. The mind will scream. But if you persist, the inner noise will start to fade. Calm doesn't arrive like a wave. It arrives like a drip. Slowly, the mind learns not to fear itself, and when that happens, something subtle but powerful unfolds. You begin to inhabit yourself. You no longer depend on the world to feel at home. It's enough to close your eyes to find a safe place. And in that space, anxiety loses its grip, because anxiety needs movement, distraction, noise, but you no longer feed it. You've discovered refuge. Epictetus would say, the wise don't isolate themselves from the world, they isolate themselves from disorder. That's what silence is, a filter. You let in what's necessary and stop what's not. It's not about locking yourself away, but about carefully choosing what enters your mind. Because the mind, like a home, gets dirty if you don't choose who enters. Cleansing the soul begins with closing the door to noise. In the end, you understand that silence isn't the absence of life, but its purest essence. Everything living grows in silence, roots under the earth, the body while it sleeps, the mind while it reflects. And you too flourish that way, without noise, without haste, in silence. Practicing this tool doesn't make you distant, it makes you present. Because only one who has learned to be silent can truly listen. Only one who has made peace with silence can offer peace to the world. In a society that screams, your serenity will be a revolution, and that revolution begins every time you choose to turn off the noise and return to yourself. 8th Stoic tool: turn waiting into practice. Anxiety doesn't always come from fear of the past. It often comes from impatience with the future. We live in a world that despises waiting, where everything is demanded instantly: answers, results, validation. Waiting has become synonymous with loss, when in truth it's the most fertile ground for inner growth. The Stoic doesn't curse waiting, they use it, because they know that in the space between what they want and what happens, the true character of the soul is revealed. Every moment of waiting is an opportunity for training. Epictetus put it precisely: it is not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them. And the most damaging opinion we often hold is that still time is wasted time. But nothing could be more false. Life moves even when it appears still. The soul matures in the silence of intervals, just as a seed germinates underground before showing itself to the sun. What you call delay, the universe calls preparation. Practicing patience is an act of rebellion against the rhythm of haste. It's remembering that nothing valuable blooms instantly. The one who sows and demands a harvest the same day doesn't understand the nature of things. Seneca wrote that no noble tree grows quickly. Inner strength, serenity, clarity of judgment, all require time. The soul that grows impatient rots in urgency. The one that trusts grows quietly. When you wait, you are not inactive, you are consciously paused, and that pause can become a powerful tool if you use it well. Instead of cursing time, observe it. Ask yourself, what is this delay teaching me? What part of me wants to rush, and why? Every moment of waiting exposes your attachments to approval, to control, to outcomes. Facing them without fleeing is the Stoic's highest work. The next time you feel anxiety while waiting for an answer, a message, a change, or a solution, don't fill the space with noise. Fill it with presence. Breathe. Watch your mind seek refuge in fantasies or catastrophes. Bring it back to now. You don't need to know how or when it will happen. You only need to trust that you'll be able to face it when it does. Remember that impatience doesn't bring the future closer. It only poisons the present. It's the sweetest poison of the soul. It feels useful, but only weakens. Properly practiced, waiting strengthens temperance. It teaches you not to depend on the rhythms of the world, but on your own. Train daily through small exercises. Let someone speak without interrupting. Walk slower than usual. Don't check your phone the moment it vibrates. Those minimal gestures are the seeds of invisible strength. In Stoic philosophy, time is not an enemy, it's a teacher. Those who live desperate for results miss the lesson taught by the process. Because the process, that uncomfortable stretch where nothing seems to move, is where character is truly forged. That's where Marcus Aurelius tempered himself while ruling amid wars and plagues, where Seneca matured during his exile. Neither asked for speed, they asked for clarity. And clarity doesn't come from motion, but from stillness. Waiting without anxiety doesn't mean resignation. It means trusting that what depends on you is already done, and what doesn't will come when it should. It's the difference between one who fights the current and one who learns to sail it. Don't wait less, wait better. The impatient soul lives as a hostage of the clock. The serene mind, by contrast, learns to inhabit the interval. Because peace isn't found in the result, but in the attitude with which you wait. Practicing this tool won't change the rhythm of the world, but it will change yours. And when that happens, you'll discover that many times waiting wasn't a delay, it was protection. The modern Stoic understands that not every silence from the universe is punishment, sometimes it's preparation. While you think nothing is happening, life is arranging what you don't yet understand. So instead of demanding the ending, give thanks for the interlude. It's there that you cultivate the strength, clarity, and temperance you'll need when the moment finally comes. Because once you learn to wait, nothing can make you despair. The anxious mind believes that waiting is drifting, when in fact it's sailing without noise. What truly torments us isn't the lack of response, but the illusion of control over it. Yet what is control, if not a polite illusion? The Stoic doesn't try to command the flow of time, they stay steady within it. That's why, while the impatient measure minutes, the wise inhabit them. While one exhausts themselves trying to arrive, the other grows strong in the act of remaining. When anxiety strikes during a wait, observe it without judgment. Don't fight it. Don't deny it. Watch it with the calm of a witness. This is impatience, you can tell yourself. This too shall pass. There's no error in feeling it. The mistake lies in letting it rule you. The trained soul recognizes itself even in agitation. Learn to see your emotions as passing clouds. They form, shift, and dissolve. If you let them move without holding on, your inner sky will clear. Seneca said that to wait calmly is to possess before you have. Hidden in that thought is profound wisdom. Serenity doesn't depend on outcomes, but on how you await them. The mind that knows how to wait is already free, because one who can wait without tension proves they haven't placed their happiness in what hasn't yet come. They've understood that life doesn't pause until something arrives. It continues, breathes, remains alive. The time that passes while you wait can become an ally if you use it with purpose. Turn every delay into a space for inner construction. Instead of repeating, "How long will it take?" ask yourself, "Who am I while I wait?" That question reveals your level of temperance, maturity, and self-mastery. Childish impatience seeks instant gratification. Adult wisdom understands that good things need fermentation. Even the finest wine is ruined if uncorked too soon. Practicing conscious waiting doesn't mean denying desire. It means refining it. It's not apathy, it's direction. It's saying, "I don't need everything to happen now because I trust my ability to sustain the process." That trust, cultivated through slowness, becomes a shield against anxiety. You don't need to chase the future when you know your inner solidity will be enough to receive whatever comes. There's beauty in waiting too. The anxious mind sees it as emptiness, but the tranquil soul feels it as fertile silence. There, in that pause, scattered thoughts settle, the essential decants, exaggerated fears dissolve. Waiting with presence is a form of meditation. It's not about killing time, it's about letting time mature you. Imagine you're at a station waiting for a train that doesn't arrive. Most people fidget, glance at their watches, murmur, grow irritated. You instead sit, you breathe, you watch movement around you. You realize the train isn't late, you were the one meant to stop. Sometimes life delays what you want to give you space to understand why you want it so badly. And that understanding is worth more than any arrival. The Stoics didn't fear delay. They feared distraction. They preferred losing time in calm to gaining it in confusion, because time isn't measured in minutes, but in quality of presence. A single moment lived with attention can be more valuable than a whole year of mental noise. That's true freedom, not depending on speed, but on meaning. When you master waiting, anxiety loses its arguments. It can no longer frighten you with urgency because you've proven you can survive silence. And when someone tells you patience is passivity, you can smile, because you'll know there's nothing more active than enduring without breaking, nothing braver than trusting time when the soul wants to run. The next time impatience burns within you, remember this: you are not stuck, you are ripening. Each day you wait without giving up is an invisible victory. And each time you choose to breathe instead of despair, something within you grows stronger. That is the quiet practice the Stoics taught: to use delay as discipline, calm as strength, and time as teacher. Because the one who learns to wait doesn't just overcome anxiety, they overcome the fear of living. Ninth Stoic tool: Write what you fear. There are thoughts that can only be calmed when you look them in the eye, and writing is the most direct way to do that. Anxiety, when left in the mind, grows like an echo in a closed room. But once you bring it to paper, it shrinks. What seemed like a monster becomes a sentence. What felt like a burden turns into ink. Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius knew this well. Writing wasn't art, it was mental hygiene. Each written word was a way to cleanse the soul of noise, to turn emotion into reason. Marcus Aurelius wrote for himself, not for others. His meditations were not speeches, they were conversations with his own mind. Each night he wrote what he had felt, what he had thought wrongly, what he needed to correct. That simple act kept him sane amid the chaos of empire. Because for the Stoic, writing is not expression, it is training. It doesn't seek release, it seeks order. When you feel overwhelmed by anxiety, open a notebook, write without filters. Don't think about beauty or coherence. Write what you feel with brutal honesty. I'm afraid of losing this. I don't know if I'm enough. It scares me not to know what's coming. Each sentence is a purge, a way to give your enemy a face, because you can't fight what you can't see. And fear, when unnamed, rules, but when written, it's exposed. Epictetus said, "It's not the things themselves that trouble us, but our opinions about them." Writing separates fact from interpretation, what happened from what you imagine might happen. It's a way to see where the fire really is and where there's only smoke. Sometimes you'll find the blaze was nothing more than a repeated thought, and once you see it, you can put it out. Writing has a power the mind lacks. It makes what's hidden visible. The mind runs away, paper waits. It doesn't judge, interrupt, or tire. It's the most honest mirror you'll ever have. If you dare to look into it, you'll find not only your fears, but your patterns, the things you repeat, the traps you build, the ways you sabotage yourself without noticing. And from that knowledge comes the first step toward freedom, recognition. You don't need to write much. 1 page a day is enough, or a few lines before bed. It's a dialogue with yourself. Ask, what is stealing my peace today? And let your hand answer. Don't think about fixing anything, just observe what appears. When you read it the next day, you'll see your thoughts with distance. The anxiety that felt like an ocean yesterday will now look like a wave. And if you make it a habit, you'll notice that each written word weighs less than the emotion that birthed it. The Stoics knew the human mind needs a rational outlet. The body exhales air, the soul exhales words. That's why writing isn't weakness, it's discipline. It's not crying on paper, it's learning to think clearly. It's a conversation with your own logos, the part of you that observes without being swept away. That voice, the one you think you've lost, returns when inner noise turns into language. In the end, writing your fears is an act of humility. It's accepting that not everything you feel is true, but that everything deserves understanding, and that understanding slowly transforms fear into wisdom. Seneca said it plainly, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Paper, in receiving your imaginings, gives them back as visible, manageable reality. Make writing your refuge. You don't need inspiration, only honesty. Because once your feelings find words, they no longer dominate you. Writing doesn't magically cure, but it organizes chaos. And in that order, anxiety loses its throne. The soul that writes becomes stronger because it learns to see itself without fear. And whoever can look at themselves without fear has already won half the battle. Next time anxiety grips you, don't distract yourself. Write. It doesn't matter if your hand trembles. What matters is that you let it out. Between those lines, you'll start to see what truly matters. And when you close the notebook, you'll notice something subtle. The fear hasn't vanished, but it no longer screams. It whispers, and you can go on. When the mind finds no outlet, anxiety turns every thought into a threat. Writing, on the other hand, gives that torrent a channel. Every word you place on the page is a vent through which the soul breathes. Seneca practiced it daily, not out of hobby, but out of necessity. In his letters to Lucilius, we see him confessing his inner battles, analyzing his fears, recognizing his contradictions. Writing was his way of not drowning in his mind. It was how he kept reason afloat amid emotional shipwreck. Because anxiety, when silenced, ferments. When hidden, it becomes background noise, a siren that never stops. But when you write it, you turn it into matter. You can look at it, study it, understand it. It's not magic, it's method. The Stoics knew this. That's why, instead of fleeing discomfort, they dissected it. By putting it into words, they moved from feeling to thinking, and from thinking to understanding. That's the path to calm. The act of writing, though seemingly passive, is deeply transformative. It's detachment in action. You take your emotions, place them outside yourself, and observe. You're no longer the fear, you're analyzing it. You're no longer the anxiety, you're describing it. And that small shift, that leap from being the chaos to being the one who contemplates it, is what the Stoic seeks their whole life. In a world obsessed with immediacy, writing is resistance, because it forces you to slow down, to articulate, to choose each word. It pulls you out of impulse, out of automatic judgment, out of the vertigo of notifications and the fear of losing control. While you write, something stops. Time. The mind, once running wild, begins to settle. You discover that many of your worries weren't problems, but unprocessed thoughts. Writing is the workshop where you give them shape and weight. You don't need to be a philosopher to do it. You only need the courage to face what you feel without dressing it up. The page doesn't need justification. You don't have to write beautifully, just truthfully. Because authenticity has more power than perfection. In every honest line lies an act of courage, and that courage slowly dissolves anxiety. Do it daily, even if only for 3 lines, before bed, on waking, or when you feel the knot in your chest. Don't wait for collapse to write. Write to prevent it. Each word will be a stone in the ground. You'll walk on more firmly tomorrow. The mind that writes trains in clarity. The heart that writes trains in acceptance. Together, they find balance. The Stoics didn't seek to eliminate suffering, they sought to understand it. Writing is the perfect tool for that. It's the mirror of the rational soul. It reflects what you project, without distortion. When you read your own fears, you realize most were only shadows. That the monster had no body, that anxiety wasn't an external enemy, but an unnamed thought. And by naming it, you restore its true size. If you make writing a habit, you'll notice a subtle but profound change. You'll start thinking before you feel. And when something disturbs you, you won't rush to distraction. You'll turn to observation. You'll become a witness to yourself. That's the goal of Stoicism, to see without being dragged, to feel without being destroyed. Writing is the practical form of that ideal. Imagine each written page as a small refuge where you can rest from the world's noise. There are no judgments there, no demands, no masks, only you, facing you. And though that truth may sting, it also frees, because clarity hurts before it heals, but afterward it leaves a peace that depends on nothing external. So whenever fear takes over, remember this tool: write. It doesn't matter if it's a word, a thought, or a letter to no one. The paper doesn't judge. It simply reflects what you carry inside. And when you read it, you'll understand that what felt unbearable only needed order. Writing doesn't erase anxiety, but it makes it bearable, manageable, human. Seneca said it best: there is no favorable wind for the sailor who doesn't know to which port he sails. Writing is how you chart that port. It's how you steer amid the storm, because each written word is a sail that gives you back control, not over the world, but over yourself. And once you have that, anxiety no longer commands. It obeys. 10th Stoic tool: remember your mortality. You're going to die. Not tomorrow, not on a marked date, but inevitably. And there's nothing you can do to stop it. It may sound cruel to begin this way, But in truth, it's the most liberating reminder there is. Anxiety is born, almost always, from forgetting this fact. We live as if time were infinite, as if each day were guaranteed. We worry about what hasn't happened, torment ourselves with what could go wrong, and meanwhile, life, that fragile line between dawn and night, slips away, unlived. The Stoic does not fear death. He uses it as a mirror. Marcus Aurelius repeated to himself each day, "You could leave life right now." Let that determine what you do, say, and think. He didn't say it out of morbidity or resignation, but out of clarity. To remember death is to remember the urgency of living with presence. It is the antidote to anxiety because it reminds you that nothing is as serious as your mind makes it seem. What worries you today will be dust tomorrow. What you fear losing, you will lose anyway. And still, you are here breathing, with the chance to act with virtue and calm. Memento mori is not an invitation to fear, but to clarity. It is looking at death to rediscover the value of life. It's a training in focus. When you know your time is limited, every moment becomes sharper, more valuable, more worthy of attention. Anxiety feeds on the future, but the awareness of death anchors you to the present. There is no anxiety possible when you know the only real thing is this instant, and within it, you can choose wisely, love attentively, and act with integrity. The Stoics meditated on death not out of obsession, but as soul hygiene, a daily reminder of humility. Seneca said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." Anxiety steals that time just as neglect does. It makes us run without direction, fight for what doesn't matter, postpone what would make us feel alive. Remembering that you will die isn't pessimism. It's an urgent call to stop and ask yourself, am I truly living or merely surviving? Memento mori dissolves the illusion of control. Nothing you possess, no one you love, not even your body, belongs to you forever. And far from being a tragedy, that's what gives everything its worth. If life were infinite, there would be no beauty, no intensity, no purpose. Death gives shape to time. Anxiety, on the other hand, tries to escape that boundary. It fears losing what will inevitably go. That's why remembering death doesn't destroy calm, it restores it. It gives you back the right proportions. It teaches you to stop magnifying what doesn't matter and to cherish what does. Every day you wake up is alone. There is no contract, no guarantee of renewal. Knowing that makes you wiser. You begin to choose more carefully, to speak more truthfully, to love more deeply. Anxiety doesn't vanish, but it loses its grip because it can no longer manipulate you with fear of tomorrow. When you know tomorrow might not come, you live with a clarity that cuts through the world's noise. The ancient Stoics even visualized their own deaths, not to sadden themselves, but to practice serenity. They imagined the end not with horror, but with acceptance. By doing so, each day became a gift, each conversation an opportunity, each breath a miracle not to waste on sterile worries. Practicing memento mori is learning to say, I am alive today, and that is enough. Anxiety is the denial of reality. Memento mori is the return to it. It's not surrender, it's reconciliation with the natural order of things. You are not here to control everything, but to live with virtue while you can. Remembering you will die doesn't take life from you, it gives it back. It allows you to stop postponing peace, stop negotiating with happiness, stop believing calm will come when everything is under control. It won't. Calm comes when you accept that it never will be. Imagine for a moment that this were your last day, not as cliché, but as a real possibility. Would you still care what others think about unanswered emails, unpaid bills, things beyond your control? Probably not. You'd stop, you'd breathe, you'd look at the person you love more attentively, you'd forgive faster, you'd be kinder to yourself. That is the wisdom of memento mori. It doesn't ask you to give up the future, only to stop sacrificing the present to its shadow. Anxiety fears losing everything. Memento mori teaches that you already have, or one day will, and that it's okay. Your mission isn't to retain, but to honor. Your peace doesn't depend on prolonging life, but on living meaningfully while it lasts. Every time you choose serenity over worry, you die a little to anxiety and are born into freedom. Because in the end, true control is not about mastering the world, but mastering the mind that interprets it. And only those who remember their end can live without fear. Memento mori. Repeat it calmly, not as a warning but as gratitude, because the fact that you will die is precisely what makes today, only today, so extraordinarily precious. When the voice fades and silence fills the room, only you remain. No distractions, no screens, no noise to hide behind. You realize you've been running for years without direction, trying to fix what wasn't broken, trying to control what was never yours. And in that instant, perhaps for the first time, you understand what Seneca meant when he wrote that the greatest obstacle to living is expectancy. Because you've been waiting, planning, fearing, and not living. Anxiety has been your way of protecting yourself from the void. But that void was never your enemy. It was the doorway to yourself. What frightens you isn't the world, but the depth of your own consciousness. That's why you fill your days with tasks, thoughts, and noise. Because if you stop, if you truly stop, the silence might show you everything you've avoided seeing. Loneliness, fear, fragility. And yet, freedom lives there too. What if the peace you seek isn't at the end of the road, but in the step you're taking now? What if the control you think you're losing is actually the weight that keeps you from breathing? Imagine for a moment that the universe isn't an enemy to be conquered, but a teacher showing you how to surrender without giving up. That every delay, every loss, every weight has been training your temperance. The Stoics never spoke of resignation, but of trust. Not of passivity, but of inner mastery. Calm isn't achieved by winning battles, but by refusing to fight the ones that cost your soul. Every time you try to control the future, you abandon the present. Every time you anticipate pain, you double it. But when you choose to be here, even with fear, even with uncertainty, you're practicing the highest form of courage. Anxiety seeks certainty. Life offers presence. Anxiety seeks guarantees. Life offers moments. And you decide what to do with them. You can keep fighting what isn't yours to command, or you can begin inhabiting what is. You can keep building mental walls to protect yourself from chaos, or you can learn to dance with it, knowing that stillness exists even in movement. Maybe you don't need more answers, but more silence. Not more strength, but more conscious surrender. Not more control, but more trust. Perhaps life isn't waiting for you to decipher it, but to live it. Perhaps what you call anxiety is just your soul reminding you that you're alive, that time is passing, and that eternity is in this very second. And then you understand. You don't need to control anything to be at peace. You just need to let go. You don't need to promise you won't be afraid. You need to dare to feel it without running away. You don't need the world to calm down to be calm. You need to calm yourself to see the world differently. Control disguises itself as protection, but it's really a prison. When you break that cage, chaos doesn't disappear, fear does. The world remains uncertain, but you no longer are, because now you know serenity isn't something to be found, it's something to be trained. Calm isn't out there, it's within, and every time you choose reason over reaction, acceptance over demand, you're building freedom. This is not just another lesson, it's a reminder. You don't need to master the world to master your mind. You don't need all the answers to trust the process. Anxiety taught you to fear. Stoicism teaches you to see. And when you learn to see without fear, the world stops being an enemy and becomes a mirror. So next time that urgency rises in your chest, don't run from it. Breathe. Observe it. Ask yourself, what am I trying to control that doesn't belong to me? That question, simple and fierce, may be the beginning of your freedom. And when the day ends, when the noise fades again, remember this. The soul doesn't find peace by mastering time, but by honoring the moment. Every breath not wasted on worry is an act of wisdom. Every thought you choose not to believe, a victory. Every silence you hold without fear, a way back to yourself. Because perhaps, just perhaps, life isn't about achieving calm, but remembering that you already had it before trying to control everything. Your voice is essential here. Every reflection strengthens and elevates our community, reflecting the true value of each individual and contributing to our shared Stoic identity. The reflection that receives the most support will be set as the standard of this community of Stoic minds, a community that does not flee from pain but walks through it with courage, with wisdom, with honor. We will see each other in our next gathering at Stoicism for Winners, where we will continue exploring the riches of Stoic wisdom applied to modern life. Now, take the opportunity to deepen your Stoic practice with new recommended podcast sessions. Follow us so you don't miss any reflection that could help you at just the moment when everything feels overwhelming. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we publish episodes designed to accompany you when life feels heavy, when it's hard to stay calm, when you need a word to remind you who you are. Not following us is to risk missing exactly that lesson that could bring back the peace you have been seeking. Until we meet again, remember, you are the sole owner of your perception, the creator of your peace, and the warrior of your own battle. This is the legacy of Stoicism, the art of being invincible.